Years ago, I was working in a classroom alongside a coworker who was deep in the trenches of potty training. And listen, that season can turn even calm adults into people who stare silently into the distance during nap time. Now, my coworker was having a day, okay? Not a little rough patch. I mean, one of those days where every 5 minutes somebody needed help with a shoe, a bathroom emergency, a missing cup, or a mysterious sticky substance no one could identify with confidence. And she was not exactly handling it with grace. At one point, a little 2-year-old got tangled up trying to pull their pants back on after using the bathroom. While that was happening, another child wandered away from the snack table and looked genuinely confused about where their chair had gone, even though it was 2 feet away. My coworker looked at those children like they had personally organized a meeting to inconvenience her. Then she turned to me, exhausted and completely over it, and said, "They should know this by now." And I remember trying so hard not to laugh because the children looked exactly like what they were. 2 and 3. That's it. Just aggressively 2 and 3 years old. Nobody was masterminding chaos. Nobody was plotting against the classroom. One kid was fighting for their life inside a pair of tiny pants, and the other one acted like chairs were a brand new invention. And honestly, developmentally speaking, that checked out. And maybe this is where parenting and teaching gets so emotionally exhausting. Because from the adult perspective, the task usually does feel simple. Put the shoes on, use your words, clean up the mess, say sorry. And when we repeat those things over and over without seeing consistent results, it starts to feel personal. Like they're not trying, like they're ignoring us, or like they should be further along than this by now. But I think this is the part many adults never learned. A child can understand something intellectually and still not have the neurological organization to do it consistently. And I think we've all been there in that room where the expectation feels so heavy. But today, I want to talk about what happens when we let that weight go. I'm so glad you found your way to this conversation today. I'm the nurture navigator, and this is Little Feet Big Guidance. You know, I've spent over a decade in the trenches with families and teachers just like you. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that we have to train ourselves before we can ever hope to guide them. My goal is to take these big brain concepts and turn them into intentionally loving actions you can lean into the second you put your phone down. I think one of the biggest mistakes adults make with children is assuming exposure equals mastery. We think, well, they've heard this before, and because they've heard it before, we expect the behavior to come out consistently. But hearing a skill and being neurologically organized enough to perform a skill consistently are two completely different things. And I think this is where adults accidentally start expecting a finished product from a brain that is still developing in real time, a work in progress. You know the moment your child successfully uses their words one afternoon, and you feel hopeful. You think, okay, they're getting it. Then the next day, they're crying so hard over the wrong granola bar that it sounds like somebody canceled Christmas. And suddenly, adults feel confused, don't we? Because from our perspective, the skill already existed yesterday. So now we assume the child is choosing not to use it today. But development is not linear, especially in children. And I know we've talked before about how the brain develops from the bottom up, but this is exactly where that understanding matters. Because when Dr. Bruce Perry talks about bottom up brain development, he's reminding us that regulation develops before reasoning. Meaning, when a child is overwhelmed, tired, emotionally flooded, overstimulated, rushed, hungry, or disconnected, their access to higher level skills decrease. Not because they are manipulative, because the brain under stress prioritizes survival over performance. That changes how you see the moment. Now, instead of they know better, you start realizing their nervous system cannot consistently access the skill yet. That is a massive difference. And honestly, the realization alone can soften an entire household. Because once you understand that, you stop taking developmental behavior so personally. Now, instead of standing across the room, frustrated because your child is struggling again, you start getting curious about what the struggle is actually telling you. And maybe this is the part nobody explains clearly enough to exhausted adults. Children do not learn because we emotionally demanded the skill one really intense time. The brain does not build that way. Dr. Bruce Perry explains that the brain changes through patterned, repeated experiences, meaning repetition is not proof your child is failing, repetition is the learning. And I know that is deeply offensive information when you have already said, put on your shoes 10 times before 7:30 in the morning, but stay with me. Because once you understand this, repetition stops feeling pointless. Now it becomes construction. Every repeated moment is helping strengthen the pathway again and again and again. And depending on the child, the stress level, the environment, and the complexity of the skill, some pathways need hundreds, even thousands, of repetitions before they become automatic. Thousands. Not because the child is broken, no, because the brain is literally wiring itself in real time. And honestly, I think exhausted adults struggle because we confuse exposure with mastery. We think, I already taught this. But hearing something once is not the same as the brain being able to retrieve it consistently under pressure. That is why your child can beautifully use their words one afternoon and then the next day scream like a tiny Victorian widow because you peeled the granola bar wrapper wrong. The pathway is there. It's just fragile, still developing, still under construction. And once you understand that, something softens. Because now you stop standing across the room acting like a frustrated inspector evaluating failure, and you start stepping closer like a coach helping build a skill. That shift matters deeply. Because judges make children feel shame for struggling, coaches make children feel safe enough to keep learning. And children can feel the difference immediately. That's why Marshall Rosenberg's work matters so much here, because behavior makes a whole lot more sense once you stop asking, "What is wrong with this child?" and start asking, "What is this child trying to communicate?" Sometimes the answer is, "I'm overwhelmed, I'm frustrated, I don't know how," or "I need help regulating." But children do not always have the language yet. So our job becomes helping them borrow ours. Not "use your words," but "you're frustrated. Let me help you say it." That is coaching. And honestly, many of us did not grow up with coaches. We grew up with judges. So now when children struggle repeatedly, something old gets activated inside of us. And this is where attachment and attunement matter so deeply, because attachment says we are connected, but attunement says I understand what is happening inside you. And children need both, because a child can feel deeply attached to you while still feeling completely misunderstood by you. And if struggle repeatedly creates disconnection, shame quietly starts growing underneath the relationship. Gabor Maté talks about how children will often sacrifice authenticity in order to preserve attachment. Meaning, if struggling disappoints us often enough, children eventually stop showing us the struggle honestly. Some become perfectionists, some become hyper compliant, some become anxious, some disconnect from themselves emotionally completely. And adults often praise that because it looks easier, but sometimes it is adaptation. And this is why this matters so much, this work, because our job is not just to raise children who perform well. Our job is to raise human beings who can struggle, recover, ask for help, stay connected to themselves, and still feel worthy while learning. And that kind of human is not built through shame. They are built through connection, through repetition, through somebody staying close enough to help while the brain is still learning how to do the hard thing. If this conversation is making you think about moments you wish you handled differently, stay with me here, because awareness is not meant to crush you, it's meant to free you. And if this feels heavy, take a breath, because I do not want this conversation becoming one more reason you shame yourself. That would completely miss the point. Some of you are realizing I have been the judge. And honestly, of course you have. Many of us were raised by judges, corrected more than coached, shamed more than supported, expected to know better long before anybody helped us learn better. So when children struggle, something old gets activated in us. Their unfinished skill touches our unfinished wound. Their dysregulation collides with our dysregulation. Their need feels overwhelming. Their mistake feels personal. And suddenly, we are not just responding to the child in front of us anymore. We are reacting from every unsupported place inside ourselves too. And I think this is why parenting can feel so emotionally exhausting, right? Because Sometimes you're trying to raise a child while simultaneously reparenting yourself. That's deep work, holy work. And honestly, that is why Ellen White's idea of cooperation with the divine feels so powerful to me here. Because this kind of patience cannot always be manufactured through willpower alone. Sometimes you are standing in your kitchen, overstimulated, touched out, mentally exhausted, running on cold coffee and three uninterrupted thoughts, trying not to lose yourself because somebody is crying over the wrong color bowl for the fourth consecutive morning. And in those moments, the prayer is not deep theology. It is, God, help me not make this worse. Help me see the child before I see the behavior. Help me respond instead of react. And grace meets us there. Not perfectly, but beautifully. Sometimes grace looks like pausing before yelling. Sometimes it looks like repairing afterward. Sometimes it looks like taking one deep breath before answering. That space matters because that space is where healing begins. Neuroplasticity means the brain can change. Your child's brain can change, and so can yours. What a God. Every time you pause before reacting, you are building a new pathway. Every time you repair after rupture, you are building a new pathway. Every time you choose coaching over judging, you are building a new pathway. And the beautiful thing is, you're not just teaching your child repetition, you are practicing it too, again and again and again, until gentleness becomes easier to access, until curiosity starts arriving faster than criticism, until your home begins feeling less like a courtroom and more like a safe place to grow. So no, you do not have to get this perfect, but you do have to keep returning. Return to connection. Return to attunement. Return to the child's actual capacity. Return to the truth that unfinished does not mean broken, not for them and not for you. Okay, so I think this is the part where some adults start getting nervous because once we stop judging the struggle, people immediately wonder, okay, but what am I actually supposed to do? And that is such an important question. Glad you asked. Because understanding development does not mean becoming passive. Did you hear that? It does not mean becoming passive. This is not, well, the brain is developing, so I guess we just let chaos unfold naturally. No, children still need guidance. They still need structure. Yes, they still need us to step in. But the posture changes. We stop expecting independence before the brain is ready for independence. And instead, we start thinking in terms of support first, independence later. This is what scaffolding really is. Scaffolding means we temporarily offer the support the child cannot consistently provide for themselves yet. While the skill is still developing, And then slowly over time, we remove support piece by piece as the pathway strengthens. Kind of like training wheels. Nobody looks at a child learning to ride a bike and says, "Wow, embarrassing, you still need help balancing." Of course they do. The support is part of the learning. And honestly, children need emotional and neurological training wheels too. So sometimes support looks like sitting beside them while they clean their room instead of yelling instructions from another room like a frustrated podcast narrator. Sometimes support looks like breaking tasks down into smaller steps. Not go get ready for bed, but okay, first, let's put the toys away. Now pajamas. Now bathroom. Sometimes support looks like helping children borrow regulation from our nervous system before expecting them to regulate themselves. And sometimes, especially when children are very young or deeply overwhelmed, support looks like literal hand over hand guidance, helping their hands start the zipper, helping them put the shoe on, helping them take the deep breath, helping them practice the words. Not because we are creating dependence, but because we are building the pathway through supported repetition. And this is the part many adults misunderstand. Scaffolding is not rescuing. Rescuing removes the opportunity to learn. Scaffolding stays close enough to support the learning. That is a huge difference. Because eventually the goal is independence. Because eventually the goal is independence. We absolutely want children developing skills, responsibility, emotional regulation, and confidence. But independence grows best when the nervous system first experiences enough support to feel successful. And honestly, most adults know what it feels like to learn better with support. Nobody hands a brand new employee the keys to the building on day one and says, "Good luck, figure it out." There's modeling, coaching, practice, support, correction, and encouragement. Children deserve the same process. And this is also where I want to gently say something important. Being supportive does not mean becoming silent. Sometimes modern parenting conversations accidentally make adults afraid to step in at all. But children still need leadership. They still need boundaries. They still need adults willing to say, "I'm going to help you through this." Supportive parenting is not standing back while a child hurts people, destroys things, or completely unravels alone because we are afraid of upsetting them. Supportive parenting steps closer, not harsher, closer. It's the kind thing to do, parents. Sometimes support sounds like, "I won't let you hit. I won't let you talk like this." Sometimes it sounds like, "You're overwhelmed. I'm going to help your body calm down." Sometimes it sounds like, "I know this is hard. We're still going to do it." That is what coaching looks like. Not shame, not abandonment, not permissiveness, guidance. And children feel safest when adults are both kind and sturdy, firm, because a calm adult willing to step in communicates something powerful to a child's nervous system. You do not have to handle this alone. And over time, that repeated experience becomes internalized. Eventually, the child starts doing internally what we spent hours doing externally. That is development. That is scaffolding. And that is why staying close during the learning matters so much. Hey parents, we are not raising perfectly efficient little robots. We are raising developing human beings. Tiny nervous systems, tiny hearts, tiny people trying to build big skills in real time. And maybe the next time you feel yourself getting overwhelmed or frustrated, before you react, grab their hand first, just for a second. Because I think sometimes we forget how little they really are until their tiny hand lands inside ours. And suddenly, the child who felt so difficult 5 minutes ago feels small again, human again, still learning again, still developing again. And honestly, sometimes that moment alone is enough to soften us, enough to remind us this is not a grown adult giving me a hard time. This is a child having a hard time inside a brain that is still under construction. And the way we respond while they are learning matters deeply. Not because we need to become perfect parents, no, but because children build their inner voice from our outer voice first. So, if this conversation sat with you today, subscribe to Little Feet Big Guidance and share this with another parent, teacher, or caregiver who may be carrying the heavy weight of unrealistic expectation. And if you are ready to go deeper, that's the work I do every single day. Through Little Feet Big Guidance, I work one-on-one with families and educators to better understand developmental capacity, emotional regulation, and how to create homes and classrooms built on connection instead of shame. I'm so glad you're here. Now, let's get to work.